Time for another amazing edition of the Online Dinner Party. Glad to be having that conversation and talking about it here from the Hayti Heritage Center, where we've got some amazing artwork that is on display. And of course, we've got a film that'll be featuring Brother Youssef and his legacy, a true jazz legend, but also involved in the Muslim community and the creation of one of the first mosques. Actually, I believe it was the first mosque here in the state of North Carolina and all along those lines. But he will be having a film called Moonchild that'll be showing on tomorrow. So that'll be on Thursday evening. A lot of people are expected to be here. It should be a sold out show and all along those lines. So definitely folks are enjoying the cool weather and the change in weather and all along those lines. So definitely some amazing things taking place. And I've got an amazing guest that I'll be talking to that had the pleasure of taping a lot of things. Because, you know, before there was a YouTube, before there was a Netflix, people had to be taping and learning about these things. So I've got Bob Patterson that'll be joining me. There might be other guests that'll be joining us as well. But before anyone could imagine watching it, even some people that imagined that things didn't happen, even though we know they took place. But, you know, you've got some conspiracy theorists that'll say the moon landing didn't happen. And of course, the Artemis trip just took place. And people were talking about the way it gave them a new perspective on Earth and everything like that. Some of our current astronauts and all in that space, but you still got people that said that the moon landing was a staged activity and all along those lines. But I am not one of those that believes that. I believe that we actually landed on the moon and are even planning trips to Mars and other places as well. So Bob was involved in that. And all along those lines, he actually also saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and all along those lines. And a lot of people were excited about that, including the then president, Ronald Reagan, and all along those lines. So definitely there's a lot of things that he has had the pleasure of witnessing, and he's a pioneer in satellite broadcasting. I know that this network, meaning Pod TV, was founded because Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun were seeing the what was going on in the world, and that the world needed to communicate with each other even during the pandemic. So they created this network that is now getting ready to celebrate its sixth year, or maybe even a little bit longer than that. I need to check with Nick in terms of the actual time frame, but it's been around for a while, and we've got people that come from Australia, people that come from Bangladesh, people that come from Canada, which actually we had their show on yesterday and earlier today, because one of the shows he does is Modern Investment. He also does a show about Ukraine and all along those lines. And I'm a big sports fan. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to a gentleman here who spent some time in Chicago and used to play ball with Doc Rivers, who just recently lost his job as the Milwaukee Bucks coach and all along those lines. And of course, you know, some 20 years ago, we actually won a hockey championship here in the Carolinas, that being the Carolina Hurricanes, and they are a contender again. They've got to figure out after today, after the two teams, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, played each other, who they will be playing. So that's going to be a mystery as to who they will be playing and all along those lines. So definitely folks will be talking about these things, and I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of these conversations, including conversations about Major League Baseball, NBA, and the NHL, because definitely Bob has been involved in all of that. He may even have an idea who's going to win. I know a lot of people are thinking that the Colorado Avalanche is the team to beat, even though I'm thinking our Carolina team can do well. They did win in a sweep, and now they've got to figure out if they're going to be playing the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Philadelphia Flyers, and all in that way. But definitely, Bob had the first satellite news distribution service and the world's first international HD TV satellite transmission. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing his thoughts around all these amazing things that he saw and all along those lines, and even the early breakthroughs that took place in media. Being a media person, having gone to Marquette, media technology, and all of that is very important to me. So I'm going to bring Bob in and hear some of his thoughts around modern day technology and what we can do to address it and all along those lines. Because, like I said earlier, Bob, you still got people out there that don't believe that the moon landing took place, which I find a whole crazy notion, because definitely I think Neil Armstrong was there and a number of other people were there as well. And you were there in the middle of it and everything like that. So, how did you get involved in the television business? Was it something that you always knew you were going to be in? Because my parents actually started one of the first rural radio stations in Warrenton, and it's a station that wasn't affiliated with a college station, because a lot of stations, whether it's Howard or whether it's UNC or number, are affiliated with colleges, but they created a truly community radio station that existed from about 76 to about late 80s, 87 or 88, something like that. But how did you get involved in this whole notion of media?
Hello, Mark. Glad to be with you. Uh, I graduated in 1969, and it was during the time of the Vietnam War, and it was very difficult to find a job. But I used to love sports, and I always played sports. And one day, one of my teammates' father came over and said, "Are you still looking for a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he says, "Well, come and I'll interview you and see how it all works out." I didn't know he was working for a Hughes organization. It was called Hughes Sports Network, where they delivered all the programming, radio and TV, for every baseball, basketball, and hockey team in America. And I had the perfect job because I love space and I love sports. And it was important for me to find out that I was going to be part of this. And as a result, I negotiated with the different ball clubs and actually provided the transmissions for all of them, both radio and TV. Now, back in those days, it was before satellites. It was all done by landlines in the United States. So the satellites were just beginning. It was internationally only at the time, and then eventually became domestic satellites.
Yep. No doubt about it and everything like that. Hey, Bob, just really quickly, because, right now we're in the area where the ACC is, and I do remember Jefferson, which definitely covered the ACC for a number of years. I think that it's gone other places, and now even you're getting some of the sports coverage from some of the social medias like YouTube and stuff like that. So what is your take on the modern day coverage of sports?
Well, I love sports. I think it's great. I just wish they would keep the politics out of it. That's really my only concern, because I was a big follower of the Yankees during the 1950s and followed right through the whole duration of sports. And I still enjoy sports as long as it's purely for the game itself.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. So you were saying that you've definitely been seeing that growth and all along those lines and everything like that, Bob, and everything. So tell me about how you got involved with the moon landing and everything like that. And you'll see me going back and forth because I'm actually at my other job as well.
Right. When I took the job at Hughes Sports Network, my parent company was Hughes Aircraft. And Hughes Aircraft actually built the satellites that delivered the signal of the Apollo 11. And I wrote a book that's called Iconic Moments in Broadcast History. And I actually explained how the transmission was done from the moon to Earth and then fed to the satellites to over 600 million people. And what was interesting about this particular event, it was that it was the first time America was able to see live as it was happening via satellite. Up until that time, news reports, reporters, anchors, next day's newspaper would always tell you what's happening. This is the first time we actually saw it live.
Yeah, just really quickly, one of the things we hear about in the media now is that everybody is a reporter, everybody has their accessibility and everything like that, whether that's through YouTube, Facebook, or these various networks that are out there and everything like that. And they all seem to have their own silos and everything along those lines. So I just wondered when you saw that developing and what your thoughts are around that, because now it seems like everybody and their mother is able to be their own reporter.
Exactly. I mean, you hit it right on the head. Today, anybody who has an iPhone or any kind of communications is able to do that. I explained about the time where President Trump was tried to be assassinated in Philadelphia. And I explained that it took hours sometimes for us to actually get to the site, to do an uplink to the satellite and get it to the communications to the rest of the world. Instead, now everybody's a reporter. Whoever has a cell phone, a journalist can get on the air within seconds. And as a result, you'll be able to actually see what's happening in moments rather than hours.
I agree with you on that and everything. What do you think is one of the biggest innovations that you've seen in media, just in general? Because, like I said, you've definitely seen some innovations. You've been in the media field for a while. I was a big fan of Walter Cronkite, but also a big fan of Charles Kuralt. That's kind of what I modeled this show after, with the whole CBS Sunday Morning and everything like that. So, who are some of the people that inspired you, and what are some of the innovations that you have seen recently?
Well, Walter Cronkite was one of them. But in those days, back in the 50s and 60s, we used to get our news from the anchors, but they would report both sides of the story. They would give you the information and actually tell you what was happening, and then you made up your decision on what was correct or not correct. Today, unfortunately, it seems to be a different scenario. People have certain views which they share with you. They don't really report sometimes the news. They actually try to tell you what the news is. I'm one of these people. I would rather hear both sides of the story and then make my own decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's what more people should be doing, and all along those lines. One of the reasons that Nick and Kim founded this network is because they feel that education, including education and training in certain fields, isn't being done the way it used to be. And like I said, I did go to Marquette to get my journalism degree. Had the pleasure of being trained by George Reedy, who was LBJ's press secretary, among others as well. But what is your thoughts around the nature of education in general?
It's interesting you should ask that question because I'm very well connected with my former alumni with Franklin Pierce University. And they have a particular journalism broadcasting center, which is called the Fitzwater Center. And they actually provide communications and so forth. And in that, they actually tell you how they do the news. And Marlon Fitzwater, who's a friend of mine and actually wrote the foreword to the book, is very important to make sure that the people get the correct story. And that's really, hopefully, we can continue that aspect.
Yeah, that makes sense. I noticed you were one of the early pioneers in satellite broadcasting. Could you tell a little bit about how that came about and how we got into that system and how it's now changed? Because now everybody, like you said, has got the internet and there's more internet reporting and even various internet stations. We're not the only one, but there are a variety of them around the country and everything like that. But I was just wondering if you could maybe give a little bit of the weed discussion as to how satellite broadcasting used to be done.
Yes. Back in the 1960s, there was only the international satellites. And the very first satellite that was launched was Early Bird. And we used to do transmissions across the country and the world. Then in 1975, when I did the first Major League Baseball, basketball, and hockey events, their domestic satellites came into play. And as a result, we were able to now communicate via satellite, watching events live rather than hearing reports from other people. And then to move forward, when HDTV came into play in 1989, that really changed the whole image of television. It became quality, better pictures, better sound. And then finally, Congress got involved and said, oh, we need to do that here in the United States. And they passed a law where they were able to do HDTV, but digital. And that changed everything, Mark, because we're in a digital revolution where we can do streaming and internet and everything. And that has changed considerably. And today, to be fast forward, when it started in 1960s and 70s, they were geostationary satellites. Today, we have low orbit satellites with Musk, who then is able to transmit internet services. And they actually fly around the Earth rather than staying stationary in one location when I first got into the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Share a little bit more about your time of covering that moon landing, because, like I said, that's something that really caught my attention, and all along those lines. So I was wondering your impression when that whole Apollo trip went on there, and Neil Armstrong had that first step and everything like that. But just share your experience with that whole historical moment.
During that time, it was an amazing technology that we were able to actually transmit from the moon, which is about 229,000 miles away. And the way that was done, it was sent by what is called S signal, and it was sent down to the Earth using a very large antenna to receive the signal. The picture quality wasn't good. It was very grainy, and the noise was crackly. It was very difficult to see the astronauts on the moon, but it didn't matter because we were seeing something that history is being made live, and it was just incredible. Now, people today would have probably turned it off because the quality was so poor. But in those days, anything that was done live by a satellite caught our attention because we never saw it before. And then in 1972, just to move forward, Nixon went to China and we were able to transmit that signal from China back to the United States. And this is the first time we ever saw a communist country that we could now see live. So all this was new to us, and it was spectacular. And we didn't care what the quality of the picture was. We knew it was special.
Yeah, that was very special and everything like that. Also, share about the fall of the Berlin Wall, because I know a lot of people were very much interested in that when it took place, and definitely you were at the forefront of that as well. So share a little bit about that experience also.
Right. As I told you, that Marlon Fitzwater, who's a friend of mine, was actually telling the world that the Berlin Wall was coming down, and this changed everything. And during that time, I was actually transmitting the pictures around the world. And it was a breakthrough, because up until that time, East Germany could not have any freedom. And with the wall coming down, that changed everything. During the time that I was doing the transmission back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they were Soviet Cold War happened. And this wall coming down changed that, and it broke the Cold War, and it became a very different world, a better world for it.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything like that. I know you covered a lot of sports things, and I definitely want to hear about a lot of these, including the NBA and the NHL. I mentioned that the Carolina Hurricanes won their championship some 20 years ago or something along those lines. But one of our other founders, Kim Calhoun, is actually in Kentucky right now because she's at the Kentucky Derby, and that's always been a dream of mine to attend that, even though I've not made it as of yet. I'm in my mid-60s and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering, is that an event that you've attended, and what your impressions of the Kentucky Derby were?
I didn't attend the Kentucky Derby, but I was very much involved in the simulcasting of all the horse racings around the world. We used to be able to feed OTB and other sites, and also casinos, to do sports betting. So in the late 70s and 80s, horse racing was dying because of the attendance. Then live satellite transmission came in, and it changed everything and brought back racing where people could actually watch and bet on them. Today it's changed because we're now doing it on a mobile phone. But back there, you were able to do the transmissions from all the racetracks, and you can bet on the racetracks at LTB and other places.
What's your take on the regulation aspect of television and radio? Because I know there have been some attempts to kind of make it even more regulated, and definitely that's been something that the current president has been talking about, because he's not always happy with the coverage that he gets. But what is your take on some of these regulation ideas that are out there?
Well, I can tell you that back in my day, it was very, very important that the proper regulations were done. And in those days, they actually supported satellites, and they made it possible for us to put antennas and be able to receive the signals from almost anywhere. TV stations started to install earth stations. As a result, we no longer needed to use landlines to do the transmissions. Now we can transmit from anywhere in the world because we have earth stations and so forth. And the FCC during that time was very, very positive and very, very helpful in promoting satellite communication. Today it's a little different. Now they're shrinking the capability, meaning that it used to be C-band, and as a result, they gave spectrum. Now they're taking the spectrum away from TV stations and actually giving it to internet and other places. And as a result, it's becoming more and more difficult to go by satellite on a geostationary basis. And this is where Musk and others with low orbit is able to do transmission, because they have the spectrum to be able to do that. So I say the other problem that the FCC may be facing, which is a big one today, is that they may take live commercial television sportings off the air and giving it to internet and pay TV. And this is a big issue here today, is because we used to watch free television, the Super Bowl. Now, a lot of these sporting events, especially the football and so forth, they're going to platforms like Amazon, Netflix, where you'll have to pay. So that's going to change a lot within the United
Yeah, I
States.
was wondering your take on that because I know there's been a concern even with YouTube covering like the Super Bowl and other things like that. So, what is your take on this? And is this a negative? It sounds like you're thinking that this could be a negative because it could hurt a lot of people having the access that we used to have. And I was also wondering your thoughts around public access because I know even here in Durham we've got a big public access community, and that can be a way that people can be reached, whether that's the church groups or a number of other groups as well. But I just wondering your take on public access and also your thoughts around YouTube and others carrying some of our major sports events.
Yeah. Well, I used to watch the Super Bowl, and in the very first Super Bowl, it was free, and everybody watched it. And this is the way it's been for last 30, 40, 50 years, that we can watch free television. And as a result, growing as a sports fan of baseball, basketball, hockey, I could watch all day those sports. But today, now it's limited. Now you'd have to maybe pay for a platform and so forth. I'm not a big fan of that, but this is technology changes and people change, and I'll probably have to pay for it and so forth. But I really prefer the old way. Now, as far as PBS and so forth, they're going through a little bit of a tough time because the current administration wants to limit their capability, and that's going to change a lot. And I'll just go tell you about one particular event that I did back in 1997, where NASA transmitted the signal from Mars, and we retransmitted it to the United States. And those signals were delivered to PBS. And here we are able to show those signals to the people who watch PBS, the educational stations. And that's very important. We need to continue to provide educational programming to everybody.
Yep. How important do you think educational programming is, and how important do you think it is for the public to support public television and public radio and all in that general? 'Cause like I said, my parents had a station that was on for about 12 years, and I know that we could not have survived without government funding, but also funding from various foundations and definitely the public as well. And I know that because of the cutbacks, a lot of them are wanting to have to do more telethons than they used to do. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how one of our local affiliates seems like they're doing one almost monthly because of the fact that they've got to make up for some of the lost revenue and everything like that. So just wondering how important do you think it is for the community to fund some of these public television and radio stations?
Yeah. Education and public TV go hand in hand. I think they do a great service because they put programming on the air that others don't. For example, when I did the space shuttles and covers JAXA, PBS covers that. Where the networks go to sitcom and other type of programming. So it's very important that the America stays current on what's happening, not only in the space programming, but in education, in medical field. I know that the PBS does a lot of shows regarding medical services and so forth, and they have celebrity doctors come on. That's very important. This is not covered by commercial TV. They're looking for ratings. So I think PBS provides a very important service to the American public.
Yeah. Another thing that stations created, and a part of that was the satellite community as well, was there was this whole notion of consumer radio and everything like that. But I was wondering your take on like the eBays and the Shopify's and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't really follow them too much, but they again provide a very important service. And one of the things that I've learned through the years, it used to be only three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, that got our information from. But today it's so splintered. There's not even one area that doesn't cover some kind of programming. It is splintered where you'll have hundreds of different programming. And that's very beneficial because rather than being restricted by only three networks, we are able to diversify our programming. So that's important.
That is very important. What do you think the future of television and media? Because there was a time that people remember newspapers. I had a guest on yesterday, and they were doing work in Medicare fraud, and they were remembering when they first came out covering and putting part of their cause in like 100 newspapers. And of course, they were in the same age range that we're dealing with and everything like that. But they were talking about how they are now going to TV and going to other things. But there was a conversation about the newspaper industry dying and all along those lines. But I just wondering your take on the future of television and the future of radio and mass media.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the radio and TV media, as far as we used to know it, is starting to shrink because people seem to be more diversified in getting to Netflix or Amazon and getting their programming. They constantly watch, uh, you know, syndication programs that have been played on TV before. They don't watch television. The biggest, one of the biggest areas that has affected is the cable. Cable used to be the main resource, but today people are cutting the cord, and as a result, the churn is very bad for cable companies, and are having a difficult time surviving. Also, DirecTV and EchoStar, they had their viewership is shrinking because of this too. And people are avoiding satellites and doing over the top services and avoiding all kinds of communications and are getting it through their internet. It's unfortunately, but the commercials are losing, the commercial stations are losing their viewerships to other facets or other capabilities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's that story that you wish that you had covered that you did not cover? I know we mentioned the Berlin Wall. We mentioned definitely probably the Olympics and definitely some of the sports events. I'm thinking you probably did several World Series, and I'm a big fan of sports and everything like that. But I was wondering if you could share some of the stories that you did cover in the sports world and maybe a story that you wish you had covered that you missed.
Okay. Well, I have been involved in all of the sports that's been transmitted by baseball, basketball, and football. And one story was that it was the Oakland A's, the San Francisco game, and we were going to televise that game. And right before the game started, there was a major earthquake, and as a result, the game was canceled. But the interesting part about it, that my company was one of the few. It was ABC who was televising that event, and we were transmitting that event as well. And as it turned out, we were the only two networks that were able to provide service out of San Francisco during that emergency. No trucks, no capabilities, no communication could have gotten into San Francisco, but we were able to have landlines to get us out of there. So as a result, we at least communicated to the rest of the world of what was happening in San Francisco during the earthquake. Then also with baseball, when I did the first regular season baseball game live, it actually was from Milwaukee, where it was Milwaukee Brewers against the Texas Rangers, which was transmitted to Dallas with KXAS TV, who aired it, which was the first time live television was done by live satellite domestically. Up until that time, everything was landline. So I've had a lot of experience with sports. And one more quick story is that in 1984, I transmitted the signal around the world to over 1 billion people. And as it was happening, all of a sudden during the opening ceremonies, the signal went down and the people lost everything. And I actually bring you into the control room to share with you what transpired during that time. So in sports, it looks like everything's going to work out well. It doesn't always happen. It's the people behind the scenes that are able to deliver the signal that makes it happen, even though the technology's there. So it's a lot of stories that people aren't aware that for the
How much
professionals
is
in the industries were able to deliver it.
How much has weather impacted you? Because it seemed to me, I remember maybe it was one of the World Series where they was a power outage. It might have been an earthquake or something like that. But I do
Mhm.
remember that they has definitely been impacted by weather. So how much has the weather impacted some of these outside events and everything like that?
Well, in the early days, it could affect it. If you had a tremendous rainstorm, it could actually phase and affects the signal itself. And as a result, you would lose the signal. So if there's a snowstorm or something of that nature, you could actually lose the signal. Now, NBC used to use KU band, and that has been a bigger problem with the weather. But because of the new technology and the stronger satellites, you don't have the weather conditions like you used to. In the very, very early days, when we did landlines rather than satellite, you can not only be affected by the rainstorms, but you could even be affected by birds flying through the microwave dishes and affect the transmission. So in the very early days, you could very much be affected by it where satellites within power it is today, a lot less that situation could occur.
Speaking of the early days, I remember because I went to school in the 70s, meaning grade school and everything like that. There was a time that they would even bringing TVs into the school system. It wasn't really a day off, but I know definitely during the World Series, because the World Series used to not be at the nighttime. It used to be having some games during the daytime. And if there was a fan, there was an avid fan, there was also a teacher. They may bring the TV in there and you might wind up watching it because it was during the daytime. So I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do remember that it seems like the television was more of a community event. I used to be a fan of Andy Griffin, and of course, they talk about being at the barbershop and watching television. Even now, when I get my haircut, and I'm due for one now, that I'll be seeing people watch TV, but it's not as the same image as it was, say, in the 60s, the 70s, and stuff like that. So I just wanted your thoughts around that, because I do remember even as a grade school kid in the 70s, there was a couple of people that would, meaning teachers, that would bring the TV in because they wanted to watch the World Series, because at that time, the World Series, part of the games were daytime games.
Oh, yes. I go back a little further. I go back to the 50s, where all of the games were done by daytime. So if you had the World Series, you missed school because you wanted to stay home to watch the World Series, and it was only during the daytime. And as a result, you absolutely just idolize those people. Later on, when the networks were able to expand and so forth and bring in night baseball, then things changed. But during those days when you talked about, Mark, it was only during the daytime, and everybody just was anxious to watch it because you couldn't always see it if you had work or go to school or whatever. This was a very, very important thing to be able to do, is to follow the baseball game when you could.
How important was it? Because I know another sport that was very popular. I'm here in North Carolina, and of course, we're very much into NASCAR and stuff like that. But there's also a very active wrestling community. Some people would say that that's a fake sport, but it definitely, the satellites were very important to covering wrestling and everything like that. So I just wondering your take on wrestling as a sport and also as a television experience, because whether it was definitely Hulk Hogan or even some of the other ones like Wahoo McDaniel, you definitely remember some of these wrestlers and the importance of satellite in covering those activities. So I just wondering if you did any of that coverage and what your thoughts were around wrestling, because even now you have some of the East Coast wrestlers and some of the ones like WWF that are still around.
Right. We used to service Turner, and Turner covered the wrestling quite a bit. And as a result, we were able to do the transmission and provide the space segment and so forth. Now, I don't consider wrestling quite a sport, only because it's entertainment. And
Right.
that's fine. People love entertainment. So as a result, they enjoyed watching it and they were able to see it. But for me, I like the kind where you don't have it predetermined how things are going to work out.
Now that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned covering some of the great baseball players, and I imagine you probably had the pleasure of covering folks like Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and other folks like that, and maybe even great tennis players like Arthur Ashe and John McEnroe and folks like that. So tell me a little bit about your coverage in the baseball field and some of the great legends that you had the pleasure of working with.
Oh, I really did. I actually have had the privilege of working with some of the greatest sports legends of all times. Uh, One night, Joe DiMaggio came up to my office and we started talking about it. Here's the Yankee Clipper, which I adored because I was a Yankee fan during the 50s and the 60s. I did a telecast which was the retirement of Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali came to our table. He seemed like a big kid because he was funny, he was enjoyable, he was extremely likable. Probably one of my favorite is Arnold Palmer. We used to
Mm.
do all of the Golf Channel events, and we did all of their tournaments and so forth. And I was invited to his invitation to play golf. And that day was special because Arnold and I were able to talk together and take a picture. And the thing about Arnold, more than anybody, he was the ambassador of golf. He was so pleasurable. He was able to be reachable. He talked to you. He was a real person's person. I really appreciate that. And then there's one other that most people may not be aware of how important this gentleman was. His name was Jackie Robinson. When
Hmm.
I graduated 1969, I sat down with Jackie Robinson, and he gave me some of the best life experiences I could ever receive. He told me, he said, Bob, you could do everything right, and it still may not be good enough because life is unfair. And boy, in the satellite world, things don't always go well. And it's not what you do, but respond to adversity. And Jackie Robinson's words always reminded me that in face of trouble, you need to come back and be stronger than ever.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. We actually have a Jackie Robinson way here because this is the home of the Durham Bulls, which of course they made that movie Bull Durham about and everything along those lines. So there's actually a road name for him, and I know that they salute some of the Negro League players at least once a year at our Durham Bulls games and all along those lines. So it's definitely an important part of the legacy and all along those lines. You mentioned some of the lessons you learned from Jackie Robinson. What were some of the other lessons you learned from some of the people that you had the pleasure of working with and interviewing?
Well, I'm going to talk from a space point of view, is that I was able to meet a number of astronauts, and that was important. Also in 1979, I received a VIP tour behind the scenes of the very first space shuttle. The very first space shuttle was supposed to be called the Constitution, but there was a campaign by the people who watched Star Trek, and they sent in letters to President Ford, and they actually changed the name to the Enterprise. And during that time, I was able to see the actual prototype. It never flew. It was a prototype for future space shuttle missions. But what I did learn on that day, which I didn't realize the importance of it, when the technician was telling us about the service, they had a problem with the tiles. The adhesive wouldn't hold properly. And he was explaining that to me. And then lo and behold, with the first space shuttle, which was the Columbia, when it returned back from space, 400 titles actually flew off. And that had been a problem for the rest of the particular program. So I was there not realizing that I was hearing something that nobody else knew about.
Yeah, you learned something very important and everything like that. Just really quickly, whenever you watch TV shows, and particularly the news or even the shows that are, uh, whether it's something like 60 Minutes or whether it's something like a satellite broadcast of a sports broadcast, you see how many people it takes to get these projects done. So, can you talk about the necessity of how many people it takes to even get a television show off the ground and everything like that, particularly those that are big and national and international?
That's a good question, because people think that all they have to do is turn on the TV set and the picture's going to be there, never realizing that thousands of people behind the scenes who has to put the programming on. I mean, it's besides the people behind the cameras and the technicians and the reporters, but there's also the technicians covering the satellites. And so as a result, there is literally thousands of people to put on an event, and you expect to see it as soon as you turn on the TV set. If any of the people knew how difficult it was to put on a live event, such as like the Olympics, where it takes months of preparation and it takes a lot of dedicated people to make sure the show's on the air, they would appreciate just seeing the signal. So yes, Mark, I'm glad you brought it, because the people behind the scenes is the people that does it for the world.
And I'm a big fan of logistics, even at the Cultural Arts Center that I work at. I'm a big fan of there being people that do kind of the logistical work, even going to other centers to get a groundwork if there's something going on. Because I know that we used to do the Road to the Apollo, and we would have a gentleman, who's actually a good friend of mine, Ray, that does the notion of being the logistics campaign person. So he'll go there and do advanced work and everything like that. So how important was it in your work to have advanced people that are actually advancing the location before you even get there?
It was extremely important. I mean, the way it used to be is that you would receive a phone call and you had to do a transmission. And if you did, you actually had to go out to the site and do a site survey and
Right.
see where the transmissions are, where the technology is, because you had frequency problems. You just couldn't run out there and hope to do a transmission. So as a result, you had to do a particular site survey, and that would take maybe weeks or days before. It's not like running out today where you can use an uplink truck and be on the air within 10 minutes. It was a totally different scene.
Definitely a different scene at that time and everything like that. Was there ever a time that you went to a location and they didn't have the right equipment or the right material, so you had to scratch the project that you were planning to do? Maybe it was an Olympics, maybe it was something overseas like the Vatican or something like that. So was there ever a time that you had to adjust yourself or maybe even cancel something because you didn't have the right equipment?
Yeah, many, many a time. And let me just share you a little bit of an anecdote of a story
Yeah.
about what technicians could and would do to keep the show on the air. I tell about a story where we did a transmission in Philadelphia, and with a TVRO, that's a television receive antenna, which would be parked on a trailer. And the technician parked it in a restricted parking space. And as a result, it was the only area that we were able to see the signal with line of sight to the satellite. And a cop came by and said, "Get your transmission and your facilities out of here." And the guy, our technician, is trying to explain to him, "Look, we have a show going on into the arena. 2,000 people are watching it. We need to stay here." The cop was unhappy. He called a tow truck. He brought a tow truck out, started cranking up the antenna on top of the trailer. Our technician actually jumped onto the trailer and was hanging on from the trailer, lowering the antenna so it stayed on the signal with the satellite, so the program would continue into the arena. The cop was just mesmerized, couldn't believe what he was doing. And he said, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, the technician says, "My job, sir." And with that, the technician continued to provide the service. The cop finally said, "All right, we'll work something out. We'll let you stay the way that the antenna is on top of the tow truck until the program was over." So talk about having initiative. This technician really had initiative.
It sounds like they had a tremendous initiative, and all along those lines, so I was just noticing that they had that tremendous initiative. One of the things I've noticed is that, historically speaking, satellites oftentimes had to be in rural areas, and all along those lines. I mentioned my parents had a radio station, and actually the satellite for that radio station was actually on our farmland that my grandparents owned. And all along those lines, I know there's some even here that are in rural areas, but now it seems like they are able to be in areas that are more urban and everything like that. So has that changed, and how has that changed? Because it does seem like we've had a change in the way that satellites are handled.
Yeah, very much. It changed dramatically through the years. Back in the 1970s, the late 70s, early 80s, actually home residents actually started to install their own antennas in rural areas. And they would put TVRO antennas in their backyard. And during that time, they were able to get programs from the satellite. And that was very important for satellites because satellites had the capability of transmitting ubiquitous throughout the United States, where landlines were only being able to be fed to certain areas. So rural areas benefited very much from satellites.
No doubt about that. And you've got all these great stories. I've got another fellow podcaster that's joining us, and she's done a lot of work into the area here in Raleigh and all along those lines, but she's also an artist. So I'm hoping that April will be able to share a little bit about what she's got going on, because I know that you're based outside of North Carolina, but April's based here in North Carolina, and she's got this whole notion of her fine arts and the things that she's doing tremendously in the art field. So April, share a little bit about your podcast and what you've got going on. And I'm talking to Bob Patterson, who is a founder and a major leader in the satellite space.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that was very interesting, Bob. So
Thank
I'd like
you.
to hear more about that. But I'm a recovering senior corporate marketer, is the way I'd like to put it, 30 plus years. And I am going all in on myself and taking my side business that I've had for about 20 years and making it my full-time gig, and really just working hard to build my business. And I sell originals, prints, and I also have an interior design online store where decorators or, just people wanting to have some interesting things for their home can go and purchase. I am also, as he said, I'm a host for a YouTube show called Artist Antics with April, where I talk to creatives about creativity, and I'm looking for anybody who is creative. Anything from, I've had filmmakers, photographers, musicians, fine artists, dancers, poets, ghostwriters, you name it, they've been on the show. So really interesting, and I learn a lot from each one of them. But yeah, that's the gist of what I do.
Yep, definitely, and everything like that. So you've done some great things. How did you get involved in the YouTube space and all along those lines? Because, like I said, you've had tremendous success with YouTube, and I was really impressed. Even though you're here and there where I'm at, but I was going like, she's had some tremendous growth. So how did you get involved in making a YouTube site and to kind of like promote your art?
Yeah, so lots of different ways. I mean, that's two different questions to me. I'll take the YouTube one first, but I just started talking to people locally, trying to get involved in the local groups that are either for artists, fine artists, or just in general, some of the art groups that kind of cater to all the kind of creatives that are in the area. And I started asking them to come on to YouTube to talk to me about their process, their, what they do, what inspires them, how they got there, who helped them, how they transitioned to full-time work. And, selfishly, it was for me kind of investigating for myself, but also I wanted to build this community that I couldn't find really to have everyone, be on a single platform to say, okay, when they have a question or issue going on, they can just reach out to all of us and say, hey, has anybody dealt with this? What do you do? So that's really what it is. It's all because I'm building my business and I want to learn from them. And I tell you that every guest I've had on, I've learned something from in some way. It could be, social media, it could be, just part of their art process. It doesn't necessarily have to be, digital, but yeah, it's just been fascinating, and I've made some good, I feel, lifelong friends already from doing that. So it's helped a lot. But to market myself, I'm doing all the things, doing the emailing, the social media. I have a part-time social media person that helps me to post while I'm keeping my head down in the studio. But I'm going after interior designers to help them with their projects and their clients. It's kind of a model that I used in the past that worked really well when I was in Florida. So yeah, my main target is interior designers, but also art collectors and anybody who, loves, blues music in particular, because I paint a lot of blues musicians. And yeah, I have a lot of niche, what I call series of paintings that cover either spirituality, musicians. I have an Asian series. I have realism and abstracts. And I was doing my abstracts for a while, these swirls that I got known for in Florida, but I stopped doing them, but I'm open to doing some of those again. So I put some of them up on the new site, and yeah, it's just a lot of relationship building right now to get the good word out that I'm here and available to do custom projects, as well as, I have already a set of originals that the designers can pull from for whatever they need. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. What has surprised you? And I've got a question that will cover both of you. But what has surprised you the most about the art world and the art world in Durham, North Carolina, and in the Triangle in general? So, what has surprised you the most about the art community and your dealings with the art community?
Yeah, no, I just think I want to be mindful of how I say this. I think that it's been hard to figure out where somebody who's not new to art, but who's new to the area, the industry in this area, how I can make traction quickly, because getting accepted in juried shows and for exhibits, etc. It's a lot of relationship building. I hate to say it. I mean, you have to have good art as well, but I'd say 50-50. It has to be 50% of building those relationships. And it's the long game, and it takes a while. And I'm just finding it hard because artists aren't marketers like I am. I have kind of the fortunate experience of being a marketer. So I think very business like on one side, but then, when I'm painting and doing my art, I'm letting go on the other side. So it's an interesting mix. And from all the conversations I've had to date, it's just, I realize how many people don't actually know how to market themselves as an artist. And, they do all the things that you're supposed to be doing, but I'm trying to create some change and disruption in how art is bought, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, I'm really trying to figure out, what other ways could I get to the collectors or the designers that haven't been done so far. Yeah.
I'm putting in this is for both of you. Do you think relationship building is? We were talking about that earlier with even Bob and how much he had to have a relationship with the people in the crew, the television crew. But I also imagine there's a lot of relationship building in the arts world as well, whether that's theater, whether that's visual arts and everything like that. And my dad is actually an artist also here in the area, all along those lines. But how important do you think relationship building is?
Oh, it's, I think like with any industry, it's very important, but in particular, the art industry, because, all the galleries, all the artists, it's a very close knit community, and everybody knows everyone, even though you might be in a group, over here in a sub city out of Raleigh, they know everybody in the other groups all over the place. So you have to really, come in and have a curious mind and be open and try to tell everybody, hey, I'm new, I don't know what's going on, help, I'm willing to listen, I'm open, so it's extremely important, especially when approaching the galleries for exhibit. It's they have to know that you're a part of the community already. And even, a lot of them want to know that you've exhibited in the past, so that they know how to do it, what it entails. Like, you can pull people there, it's a cost for them to have you in their space. So it's 100% important. Bob, I'll stop talking so you can put your 2 cents in.
Yeah. How important is relationship building to you, Bob?
I just want to say, April, while I was listening to you, I've had a real difficult time to get acclimated to the social media world. It's very, very difficult. And one of the things that I'm learning is that in writing a book, that's one thing, but the whole marketing is a totally different animal.
Oh, yeah.
And that is very difficult to get into. So I listened to you, what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I have a degree in it, and I had 30 years of experience in Honeywell, New York Life, MetLife, JP Morgan. And my last position was with a data company that I used to be a client for. I used to fill my customer data holes with their data. But yeah, it's complicated, and it's even getting more complicated. And even with all the technology that's coming out now, you still have to know what you're doing. And so and you have to know, and every industry is different. Every approach to that can be different. and you never know what's going to, hit and stick to the wall. So you got to keep testing all the time. That's my one tip for everyone listening to us is you got to keep testing all the time, and whatever wins, then you start doing that more and see what happens. But if you're not mixing it up and like experimenting every week, then you're missing an opportunity to like gain, some traction in that
April,
realm.
how important do you think it is for people to get involved with some of the new technologies? I was actually at an event recently, and the person was actually surprised because I was talking to them. It was actually part of the Biscuits and Banjos event, but they were actually surprised that I knew anything about TikTok. And they was, I do have a TikTok account, got an Instagram account, and I actually use those accounts. But and these were young people I was talking to. But how important do you think it is to engage in some of these newer technologies, whether that's TikTok, whether that's Instagram, whether that's Facebook, or some of those other things that exist there? Because like I said, these young people, they were probably in their 30s, were sitting there going like, you know TikTok? You got a TikTok account? I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And, for me, TikTok and Instagram are kind of my targets right now. And they are where everyone's going to get that instant feed of information. So if they, happen to start looking at other artists, the algorithm will eventually pick you up to show them in their feed, for example. So you have to be in there. Think of it as not necessarily free advertising, but because you have to take the time and energy to put all that together. But I do have to say, even though I'm a marketer and I know how to do it and, very well, actually, and I've had teams of people under me doing, these things, you still have to know how yourself, but I implore you to like learn how to do it and then hire somebody who knows better than you to schedule it, start giving the suggestions, and that's an avid user of those platforms that knows what's going on and how to get some traction and engagement. Because the girl that I have working for me part-time, she's worth her weight in gold, and she's always giving me suggestions and making changes and stuff I wouldn't even have thought of. And, it's always evolving. So, with AI and everything that's coming out now, it's just, you have to keep up or you're going to be left behind. That's really the name of the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's the name of the game. So would you suggest that Bob get a TikTok account and everything like that for his work that he's doing and everything like that?
No, and that's a good point. Like if you have the time to, put up TikToks or videos in Instagram, then yes. But if you don't have the time and you don't want to learn that tool, then either hire somebody to help you and tell you
with a book signing here. I never got this.
And we're getting some crosstalk. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I would just say either learn it or hire somebody after that. Or if you're not interested, then there's other things you can do, but it's definitely a way to get a following quickly is the way I'd like to say it. Yeah.
I just want to say, April, you're spot on. I have gone through this, and it's a learning experience. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and so forth. But I have very limited followers. So as a result, I only are able to reach a certain number. And your expertise of trying to figure out how to grow your marketing approach is absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I met with Jack Canfield, who wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul, and he was able to promote my book on X. So I agree with you. You've got to find some people to help promote you. Otherwise, you're going to get the word out. You're right on.
And for me, it's worth that exchange because I don't want to spend all my time editing video and like scheduling and figuring, out what the tests are and what the, what I should be doing. Like I need somebody to help me, and she's just putting, 10 hours, maybe 20 hours in, sometimes not even. but it's worth its weight in gold to me because
Mhm.
now I don't have to worry about all that. She's already set up for it all and has a scheduler. We even have a calendar that tells me when things are posting, so I know not to overstep. If I want to put something up myself and I have a quick thought and I just want to post it, I know when these posts are going out, so I don't put them, close together, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just really quick and easy system of approval and a scheduling calendar. And we go through and set it all up, and we talk about, okay, what's going to be the schedule next week, and what are we going to focus on? And it helps clear all of that out of my mind so that I can actually be creative, because you can really get into the minutia of all this and spend your whole day just doing admin. And
Well, you can definitely do that and everything like that. How did you get involved in art, April? I know that earlier I'd been talking to Bob, and he talked a little bit about his background, but were you always an artist? Because you sound like you also
I
have
was.
an extensive marketing background, but were you always an artist that knew you were going to be an artist, or is this something that came about later?
Well, I always was artistic since I could put a crayon in my hand, and I won a lot of art shows growing up, in grade school and high school. I went to art school for a hot minute in Ringling in Sarasota, Florida, and I didn't fit in there. They weren't as business minded as I wanted them to be. And I was kind of in this weird space where, it was very cliquey, even though it was an art school, just like a regular school. And I didn't fit in with any of the cliques. And they were like, what do you mean? Why do you want to talk about that? And just like, well, it's important. So I decided to go and get my marketing degree. And then my career just took off after that, because I had one of my professors took me under her wing, and I was doing some projects outside of school with her, some real life, company projects. And that just sent me on this trajectory of my career. And I would have never in a million years thought I would wind up in finance or banking as an artist. It's kind of comical to me, the life path and the journey, but I'm really grateful for it, because I became a national speaker and trainer for New York Life for 13 and a half years of that time. And I was on stage, training groups, large groups, small groups, you name it. And
what are some of the things that you brought from the field of banking into your artwork? So that's, as you were saying, that they do seem very contrasting. Some people would say left brain versus right brain.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things you brought from the banking world into your notion of being an artist?
Yeah, well, you still have to be creative, because as a marketer, you're still doing branding, you're still doing, advertising and promotion. So you're working on messaging. It depends if you have an agency working with you or not, but yeah, you still have to be very creative and listen to the salespeople and the people out in the field that know more than you do about what the customers really like about what we're doing and what they would want to change and what is a pain point for them. And once you kind of gather in all that information, you can be creative with how you're getting that message out. So it's still very creative. And I bring all that into my art business. I'm really trying to brand myself as a Cuban American artist, which is really my identity now. And I grew up in a very Cuban American household, and I had a hard time just claiming that in the beginning, because I don't speak fluent Spanish. So I thought you had to in order to claim that. But I grew up in a household where they spoke Spanish and English. I had to build my own brand, just like from corporate marketing and art. You have to give people a story about who you are as an artist. And it's really important. I say it all the time. It's like 50% of the sale of art is they want to know your story as an artist,
Yeah, they definitely want to know the story. That's part of what I do, even here at Data, as being the staff historian and everything like that. But just really quickly, all of in that same field, this is for both of you, Bob and you, April. this notion of the imposter syndrome is something I talk about oftentimes on the online dinner party because a lot of times we can be our worst critics and be self-defeating. So how did y'all get past that, or did y'all ever even deal with that? Because that's something that I know a lot of people face, is that self-defeating attitude, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's in art business, or whether it's in day-to-day life, whether it's even like with your significant other. So how do y'all get past that self-defeating aspect of and the imposter syndrome?
Bob, I'll let you go first since I've been talking a lot.
Well, I was going to suggest that you start first,
Oh.
actually.
Okay. Well, I think from my show, in talking with so many artists in the last year and a half, I realized that we all have imposter syndrome. And all of these creatives that have done some great things in their career, they all feel imposter syndrome. And I think until you get validation, with whatever that means, like you have a certain position or you get an award in the industry or whatever it is, that you still are trying to figure out, am I doing okay? Am I doing this right? Is this good? You're always checking to see number one, if you're even in the ballpark, and two, where are you at in position with others? So I don't think that's just a human condition, but I don't know. I don't really feel imposter syndrome. I mean, I've had some minor insecurities in the past, but never felt like I didn't belong there or, wasn't versed in what I was doing in art or business. But, there's always room for improvement. I'm not as good as I want to be, but I'm better than I was, so I feel like I'm always growing. But Bob, I don't know how you feel.
Well, basically, my difficulty is to reach the general public. I find out that the demographics plays a very important role in my position, because people who grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s love space exploration. And as a result, they can kind of follow what I'm saying and talk about it. But today's youth has a whole different view of things, and they may not follow space exploration or other types of services. And it's hard for me to reach them. I don't know how to do it. And as you explained before, you have to be on social media. And since I'm not familiar with that platform, it's very difficult for me to reach that demographic. So I'm very limited on what I'm capable to do, unless I find somebody like an expert like yourself and others to know how to market to those people.
Yeah, I think they're really into UFOs, and so, I don't know if that helps or hurts, but I know it has probably nothing to do with what you do. But I'm just saying, if you want to get their attention, if you have anything like that, they might be like, whoa, what is this guy talking about? So that's a big topic right now. Yeah.
Yeah, the one good thing, and I'm hoping that it rekindles the interest, is the fact that we just recently went back to the moon. And as a result, hopefully America can kind of get that spirit again, and as a result, follow what happened. So I'm hoping that we kind of go back to the old way of watching the lunar mission, and follow that and enjoy that, and bring back the spirit of America.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people that were following it. So I think that it's still there for some people, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's not as flashy as some of the other things that are going on. So that's why they're not following it, which is just a sign of the times, really.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
as flashy and everything like that, but how much are the young people following the moon travel in your community and everything like that? And in that same line, April, how important do you think it is for there to be cross-generational communication? I'm a big fan. We're talking to a potential candidate for a job here, and we were talking about how it's important to reach out to the young people to get them where they are, whether that's in the video games or into the various other things, but it's also important to reach out to people that are even older than I am, and I'm in my 60s, but to reach out to like the folks like my dad that is in his 80s and is an artist, or his lady love who is in her, I think she's in her 80s as well, either that or late 70s, and is very much into the dance community. So how important do you think it is for us to have cross-generational communication?
Oh gosh, it is the one thing that I think we all should be pushing for and we're concerned about. It's so needed right now because of the different generations, the boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, etc. are they have a whole different experience of life
Yes.
growing up, and so we don't necessarily understand them, and they don't understand us because they didn't experience it that way. So to your point, Bob, they don't understand how important it was and what an exciting thing it was to go to the moon. Now they're like, okay, everybody's talking about space and going to Mars, and the what are the missions they send out for the photos? I forget the name of them now,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think that it's so important to keep all of those conversations going, whether it's about space or whatever it is, to make sure that everybody understands each other's point of view. And a lot of I hate it when I say this because I sound like an old person. The younger folk, just they don't want to see how we see it, and there's some validity to that. And I think that has to do with people. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
If I can just add to what you were saying, April, being a boomer myself, growing up in the 50s, we had the Sputnik in 1957, and that just rocked the world. It changed our whole view of things. We were very passive and comfortable in our scene. And then when the Russians launched the satellite, it changed the whole world for us. We became very threatful because it was not only the space race, but it was also a era where a foreign adversary could launch missiles into space, and it was very scary. And then we had the Cold War situation that again put us into a situation of competition between other adversary countries. And so as a result, we grew up as astronauts being rock stars of the universe. We absolutely adored them. So we have a close affection to everybody who's into space. And unfortunately, maybe the younger group or people of today don't realize what we went through on such turbulent times in the world, because it was very scary back there, because the nuclear missiles were very real to us.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's still it's still a threat. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it's still on everyone's mind, I think. But yeah, I think it's so important for us to understand each other. I think it's not just a U.S. thing. I think it's all across the world, or at least with some cultures, not all, but that they don't muted thing on Mark. I don't know what keeps coming up. I'm just
That was on me, and that was my errors and everything like
okay.
that.
No
So
worries. I just want to let you know in case you didn't see it. So I think it's a cultural issue of the older people not being respected or thought of as maybe they know something we don't because of technology and what's going on. They think, oh, they were born before any of this happened. They don't understand what's going on. But there is some good information that can be gleaned from the older people in our life. And I think there's a missed opportunity there. And like I said, there's some cultures that embrace their elders and they respect them and they listen to them, but there's others that are, the paradigm shift in technology has just sent them into thinking we don't know what we're talking about. So it's interesting, and I hope that it shifts, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I just want to share with you, because even though I was in a technological advanced field, my son, who's in the digital world, thinks I'm a novice at everything. I don't understand the way things run. I have to ask him for everything, how to do this, how to do that. And that's a big distinction, because he grew up in the digital world. And as a result, he understands that, but it's hard for me to understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the difficulty between the different generations.
Yeah, and I'm what they call a tweener, so I'm right in the middle. So it came when technology was, starting, but I also lived a while before it came. So I'm a tweener, and a lot of companies look for tweeners because they have a foot in both, so they understand the digital part, they understand the non-digital way of life before things got to where we are now. But from everything I've been listening to, because I'm a big nerd and I listen to all kinds of crazy podcasts all day, but while I'm painting, and from what I understand, this AI revolution is going to be exponential. So in the next 3 years, we're going to be a totally different, totally different way of operating in the next 3 years. So,
Hey, April, just really quickly, along those same lines, how do you get past the silo aspect of the art world? Because I do know that sometimes people, even here in the Triangle, there'll be those that are in Raleigh that are only going to do stuff in Raleigh, and then there's people in Durham, and all along those lines. And then, of course, there are cultural silos as well. So how do you get past that? Because it sounds like you are trying to put your art in various communities and not trying to be stuck in a silo. But there are a lot of silos that exist. So how do you get past that silo mentality?
Well, I'm just one of those people that jumps in and says, "Here I am. What do I do?" I don't kowtow to those groups that think, "Oh, she can't be in here," right? So I just start talking to them, and the answer still might be no, but at least I've talked to them and understand why. And they appreciate that, but I just jump in. You have to be curious. You have to get yourself out of the way, talking about that imposter syndrome we were talking about before, like just to truly be honestly curious and try to understand what's going on and who is who, and gain all the information that, you can from these people. It's worth its weight in gold. Like, you need to be able to go up to people and say, "Hi, I'm an artist in the area. I'm trying to get connected. How are you? How do you fit in this group?" And I've gotten involved with a couple of Latin art groups and some that are, local. I'm reaching out to other areas outside of North Carolina. I'm going back to my, database from when I lived in Florida and had my business thriving there. So, you have to just open it up as you can. I mean, with reason. You can't boil the ocean, as they say, but you need to have a strategy and a plan, which I always talk about, of how you're going to start, who you're going to go after. If you have 6 or 7 markets that you want to go after and you've kind of figured those out, you pick your top 2 and start with them and really get into them and, go after those top 2 markets of yours for whatever reason they are the top two. And then if one of them falls out, or if they both fall out, then you go to 3 and 4 and say, okay, I don't think that's where I should be. It's not working. Let me go to the others. But you have to start somewhere and really get in deeper with them instead of trying to go around and saying, where can I get a quick hit? You got to really get involved and start talking to people. But yeah, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. For both of you, how do you get past that no? Because no is a very small word, but a lot of times it can be a big word, and a lot of times we are intimidated by no. And I know some people that even create no's, because I know some people that outprice themselves and everything like that, even to the art world, where they will set a price that they know most people will not be able to buy because they're not really trying to sell it for whatever reason. But how do you get past the no's? Because no is a very small word, but it's a very big word.
Yeah, well, I usually, hopefully in that conversation, they tell me why. And if they say no, it's because I can't afford it right now. I always say, well, just keep my information. You never know what's going to happen in your journey. And I'm happy to help you when you're ready. And, just leave the door open, and they'll remember that because you've treated them with kindness, even though they maybe can't afford what you're doing, but yeah, I've had people just say, no, that's not what we're looking for right now. And you say, okay, great. That's fine. If you know of anybody who needs my type of work, please feel free to pass it along. I always turn it into an opportunity to say, okay, for you, it might be a no, but other people that might be a yes for me. So I always am very free about saying, okay, well, of anyone who needs me, just let me know. And it's as easy as that. Bob, I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
No, I think the way I used to run a business is that do less talking and listen to your customer, because they'll tell you what they want.
Yeah,
That's it. I've done a lot of custom projects where I've had to do a lot of listening, and then I got really good at getting out of them what exactly it is they are looking for, because they have something in their head. They just don't realize it, because the worst thing for me is if someone says, oh, just do your thing, just do whatever you want. I'm like, no. you have something that I said, well, if I do a black and purple painting, is that okay? And they're like, no. And I said, okay. So you have some parameters there that I need to know about. And I usually pick an extreme just to show them, we have to come to some kind of understanding about size and color and theme, and give me some references of, whatever it is that you want, and we'll start honing in on it. But they always say, oh, just do your thing. And I'm like, no, that's the worst.
Yeah, that's the worst answer. Bob, you mentioned something very important, and I know I've talked about it on this show before and everything like that. How important is listening to both of you? Because I think that listening is a lost art, and a lot of times people do more talking than they do listening. I'm a big fan of listening, but how important is listening to your business journey and your creative journeys?
It was extremely important for me, because I negotiate with broadcasters around the world, and it is so vitally important to listen what your customer says, because they'll tell you what they want. I'm not there to tell you what I'm going to send or sell. They will tell you what they want. And if you could deliver what they want, they will buy it. That's very important. Listening is very important.
Yeah. And sometimes we think we're listening, but really we're just waiting to get our point across. I know people, I've been in conference rooms for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of people who, latch on to something and they want to get their point out, and they're missing what's being said, and they're so hyped up about waiting to get their point out that they're not actively listening. And by the time they're able to say it, it's like it doesn't make sense. So like they've already addressed it, or whatever it is, and then they feel kind of stupid or silly. But Yeah, that's a good example of not listening. It's like you're not actively listening to what's going on and
No, I
taking
agree with you.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Get ready to wind up very shortly and all along those lines. This has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed having both of you. But who were some of the people that inspired you, April? And then there's a question that I asked all my guests and everything like that. But who are some of the people that inspired you? I know that earlier Bob was talking about Jackie Robinson and some of the people that inspired him and some of the lessons that he learned from them. So who are some of the people that inspired you, and what are some of the lessons that you got from them?
Yeah. As far as like creativity and marketing, I've been listening to Rick Rubin, the music producer. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but
Yeah.
pretty much produced everything we have ever listened to up to this point. And he's an amazing man. He really doesn't know how to read music. He doesn't know how to play music. He comes in to get the authenticity out of the artist. And it's more like a Zen Buddhist guru in the room trying to get you to be your authentic self. And that's really, in my personal opinion, he hasn't said that, but that's what I'm gleaning from what I've been listening to. But he has a lot of really awesome points about you can't produce or be creative in order to please other people. You have to do what makes you happy, and the people will come that like what you like. You can't do it the other way around and try to, serve the audience. It's not going to work that way, and it's not going to be authentic. So Rick Rubin is one, and another one is, I'm really into blues music. So I painted Mississippi John Hurts and John Lee Hooker, and there are a lot of musicians that I just love the grit and the storytelling and the dedication to their craft and all the things that come with being a real true artist. And they really inspire me. So I try to capture some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm convinced that Buddy Guy has discovered the Fountain of Youth, because I've had the pleasure of working with him, and he's still performing. He's still running around the stage, and he's got to be well into his 90s and everything like that, or at least the 80s, and definitely still has more energy than most people have. So I'm convinced that he has discovered the Fountain of Youth. I hope that he will pass it on to the rest of us and everything like that, because I'm still shocked whenever I see him having that kind of energy at that age and everything like that. So yeah, I think he's discovered the Fountain of Youth, whether he wants to admit it to us or not, and everything like that. So I'm a big blues fan. They used to have a blues show on WNCU and also one on WCOM. So and even here at the Hayti, we used to have a major blues festival, the Bull Durham Blues Festival, that I hope they will come back at some point or another. But I've seen people like Isaac Hayes and Coco Taylor and Buddy Guy and Sapphire, the Uppity Blues Women, and a number of great blues legends, including Tommy Castro and a number of others as well. So yeah, over the 30 years that we had the festival, it was a tremendous success, and they just did Biscuit and Banjos. Yeah, they just did Biscuit and Banjos.
Talk to you after this.
Yeah, we got to talk. They just did Biscuit and Banjos. Rihanna Giddens, I know her. I wouldn't call her a friend, but I would call her a close acquaintance and everything like that. And she just did year 2 of Biscuit and Banjos that featured my friend, and I would consider her a friend, Reese Palmer and Kamara Thomas and Mavis Staples and I think the Blind Boys of Alabama. But that was at the DPAC. I did not go to the concert, but I did go to some of the lectures, including a lecture about farming and Afro farming and all along those lines. So there were some great discussions, including one that Rihanna Giddens did with an author about the connection of music and roots music to history, including slavery and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I'm doing a piece right now on a washboard player.
Okay. He wants to get it on
with a gas lamp street light next to him that says Bourbon Street. And I'm working on that piece right now. It's a washboard player on Bourbon Street. And just, I've been to Jazz Fest for before Katrina 10 years in a row. And it was just, it gave me life, every time I went, and I soaked in the music 24/7 for like 4 days of the year, and I just am so inspired by that whole area and those players. So I started this piece that I'm working on now, but yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have you check that out because I'm a big fan. As a matter of fact, right now we've got a exhibit that is portraits, and some of the portraits are tied to North Carolina Central University, including a football player and the
Okay.
current chancellor and everything like that. And that's done by
Okay.
local artists. So definitely, I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
art. And if you go to bambooturtle.com, that's my dad, and he does everything from gourds to some abstract art to a number of other
I'd
things,
love
including
to have
some that
him on the
involve.
show.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or
yeah,
anyone else you think I'm going to talk to you after this. This is a very inspiring conversation.
yeah.
But
That's
Bob, I want to hear Bob's inspiration.
yeah.
Bob, who's your inspiration?
Well, I followed the space, and so all of the astronauts, to be honest with you, I absolutely adored them because of the courage and the dedication they put into something that is risky. So those were my inspirations.
Yeah, those are great inspirations. Like I said, the question I get everybody to answer, and this will be the last one, and all along those lines is, and then we can talk afterwards as well, is how can you be reached? How can you be gotten in touch with? I know Bob has got a book. I know you've got a art gallery and everything like that. And I'm all about positivity. It's part of the reason I created this online dinner party. So if you can give a message of positivity to share with our audience, I'm sure that our audience would love to hear that as well.
Thank you, Mark. I just wrote a book that's called Iconic Moments in Broadcast History, Live via Satellite. It's a story about communications, but behind the scenes. I actually bring you into the control rooms. I actually talk about when satellites fail. So it's a story that talks about things that nobody has ever heard before. And you can reach me if you want to know more about my history at rmp-satellites.com.
I appreciate and your message of positivity that you want to share with our global community, because I do believe in all my guests giving a message of positivity as we have listeners from all over the world and all over the country as well.
Well, as far as what I may share is that during my career, I had a lot of adversities. I had a lot of ups and downs. And as a result, there's no straight line to success. And when you face those are the most important moments that you have to learn how to overcome. And that's what I would suggest for everybody to follow.
Yeah.
What about you, April? What message of positivity would you share, and how can you be reached, and the ways that folks can get your artwork?
Yeah, I'll start with my website. So I can be reached at April Paige with an I, so APRALPAIGE, fineart.com. That is mostly where all of my stuff resides, originals, prints, the online design store. You can also get to the YouTube channel there. But I'm on YouTube under Artist Antics with April. So you can look me up there. It's also April Paige Fine Art on there as the handle. So you can see that, but then the show name is Artist Antics with April. And my message is everybody has something in their heart that they're passionate about or that has been driving them their whole lives, even if it's something they love to do as a child. And my big message is you can't take it with you. So share it with the world, or at least start to try to figure out how to incorporate it in your life so you can have some fulfillment in your life. So if you've always wanted to be a photographer and you know nothing about it, then go figure it out, get a mentor, take some classes. But if you're already, doing something and you're too shy or afraid, as we talked about earlier, the imposter syndrome, to share, you have to share it. There's somebody who's going to resonate with it. Just like with art, there's every kind of art you can ever imagine in the world, right? So, and there's an audience for each artist because people will resonate to you from what is coming authentically from your heart. So if you have something in your heart, please, please, please share it.
How do you deal with it really quick? I know I said that's the last question, but sometimes other things pop into my head as well. But how do you both deal with the work-life balance and everything like that? Because that is something very important to a lot of people. Some people have children. I don't have any of my own, but I do have my two nephews. I don't know if either of you have kids or significant others, but how do you deal with that work-life balance and everything like that? Because I know sleep is important. I don't always get enough, but how do y'all deal with that work-life balance?
Well, for me, during my career, it was extremely stressful. It was a situation where anything could fail, and generally it did. So I am so thankful for being retired, and I have.
That'll take the stress away.
and now when the phone rings, I don't jump. So
Yeah.
it's a much calmer life. So I'm happy where I am at the moment.
Yeah. And for me, I can echo what you're saying, Bob, is that, when I was in my corporate positions, it's so very stressful, especially at a high level. And as, my career grew, I just got higher and higher and higher. And the stress is just more and more and more, and you have to work more hours and et cetera. Everybody knows, no, it's not new to anyone. But I got to the point where I realized, I was flying every other week to different cities to speak and train people. And, it got to the point where sometimes I'd wake up and not know where I was, like what city I was in. And also on the plane, I'm like trying to figure out a list of things I need to accomplish for my personal life. And it just got too much. And so I decided to go all in on myself, because that's a good bet. I know I'm a hard worker and I'll figure it out. If I haven't, already, I'll figure it out. So, but I balance. It's been a challenge for the balance, because I'm switching things around and testing things, because I was doing my admin in the morning and my painting, later in the day, but now I'm switching that because I feel like I have more good energy for creativity in the morning. And now, I'm doing the admin in the later part of the day. So, but it's still a challenge for me not to overwork. I'm full transparency, because I'm pushing, right? I'm trying to get this business thriving, and I always am thinking, oh, I could be doing this, or I could be doing that. And you have to have time for, downtime. It's so very important. I walk my dog. I go, we walk in the state park here that's close to me, and we have a nice lake in our neighborhood. That gets me out of my head, gets my body moving. I do things with friends periodically. I love, having the interviews with my show, because it's not about me. I'm just the interviewer. And so it helps, there too. And I'm very curious by nature, so I love to hear their tips and tricks. But you have to have, balance, whatever that is for you. It's different for everybody. Like some people, maybe they can work 2 hours of painting and 4 hours of admin, and that's overwhelming for them, so it just depends on who you are, what capacity you have as a person. And then to your point, Mark, about your life, you have a life to live too. That's the whole point, is not to miss it, which is why I got out of the corporate arena. And I'm like, okay, I did this so I don't miss things, and I'm still pushing. So it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't quite figured it all out yet.
Man, we're still trying to figure it out and everything like that. For both of you, is there a hobby that people would be surprised to know that you have? I used to say that I had an ex that wanted me to skydive. I believe planes are for a purpose, going from point A to point B. I'm not trying to fall out of them, but I have thought about whitewater rafting, and I have thought about some other unusual hobbies. And I am into the word games, like I do Wordle, and I do some of the other word puzzles and everything like that. But is there a hobby or an interest that people would be surprised to know is of yours and everything like that? And if you can just answer that quickly, then I've got a question about education. That will be the absolute last question. But is there a hobby that people will be surprised about?
I don't know if this is a surprise or not, but I love sports. Every sport was my favorite hobby, basically. I just adored it. But later on now, what I enjoy is playing cards with my family. And we play word game cards, we play number cards, anything that has us together is an appreciation that I look forward to.
I agree with you on that. I know that when I get together with my mom, we play spinners, which is kind of like dominoes and everything like that. So I'm a big person that's into games and all along those lines. So yes, games can be very fun and they can be very social and everything like that. So I agree with you on that. So what about you, April? Is there anything that people would be surprised it's a hobby?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I live spherically, just keep that in mind. But I sing in jam bands, rock, R&B, and blues, and I also love blackjack. So I've been in some Texas Hold'em tournaments and I've gone to many casinos and won some money. But yeah, and I love bourbon, which is not something a woman normally says, but I love all the bourbons and whiskeys. Yep.
And there's a bourbon here in Durham. There's Hillside Bourbon, which is actually named after one of our African American high schools. And there's some others that are minority owned as well, because a friend of mine has one called Southern Wicked, which is a old time lemonade that is a liquor as well. And I know that I think she's connected to UNC, the founder of that. And then there are a couple of wine companies and beer companies that are craft as well. So yeah, I can relate to that and everything like that. Just really quickly, as I said, the last question, I'm going to play this video to get us on out of here. It's about education and all along those lines. And it's about supporting the support staff. So not just the teachers, and it comes from a gentleman out of Oklahoma, but also the guidance counselors, cafeteria workers, the resource officers, and all along those lines. So is there a teacher or somebody that was in your career that really helped you in your own lives and everything like that? It could be a guidance counselor, could be like maybe the janitor even, or the cleaning woman that might have given you some life advice and everything like that. So when you were in school, what was there somebody that inspired you, whether it was a teacher or a support staff?
Well, for me, I didn't really have a teacher in the early days that inspired me, but however, I reconnected with my university and I'm very, very close with them now. And as a result, they have the Fitzwater Center of Communications, and I'm a very, very big supporter. So I do have a close affinity to education.
Yeah. And what about you, April?
I have a funny story. I had a economics teacher who used to be in the service, and he was very, very strict. And we had a stadium class, 300 people, whatever. And for the first 3 weeks, I think it was, he would call my name first thing when we opened class. And he'd be like, "Where is she?" And I'd be like, "I'm right here." And he would ask me economic questions until I couldn't answer them anymore. So it would be quick fire, 6, 7, sometimes 8 questions if I could get that far. But let me tell you the lesson that man taught me, because I've never studied so hard for a class in my life. I was like, he's not going to beat me today. And everybody around me was like, we couldn't answer the first 2. So and I was reading outside of the books, like talking to people, looking at newspapers, making sure I knew what was going on. Always had my head in a book about economics. And after those 3 weeks, he says, "I want to see you up at the podium," like after the class was exiting. And he waited till everybody left. And he said, "Do you know why I pick on you in class?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Because I know that you are very smart. Don't make me have to push you again." Like, he knew that I needed to be pushed in order to get to there. Because, I didn't study very hard because I knew I could retain a lot of the information and was like, yeah, I'm going to pass the class. It'll be fine. So he pushed me beyond what I thought I could do. And from then on, for the rest of the semester, he would go to other people. And when they didn't know the answer, he would call my name and be like, "April, what's the answer?" And I'd and I'm like, these people are going to hate me after this class, but I'll never forget that lesson.
Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
valuable lesson, and I can relate to that and everything like that. Because I know even in high school, I ran that track. I was a horrible track runner. I was kind of like Charlie Brown, coming in last place all the time. But I had a coach that had a very simple philosophy, which is that I will run you, I will run you, and I will run you. And if you survive, you make the team. So, but I was also a good networker back then as well. So I recruited people that were good on the team, and we won 3 out of 4 championships of my 4 years of because it was actually a 3-year high school, but then your senior year of your junior high, you could also run. So I got to run 4 years, and out of those 4 years, we won 3 because I was recruiting good runners, even though I knew that I was piss poor in running and not good at all. So they recognized the skill that I had, to your point, of being a good networker even back then. So I want to play this commercial, get us on out of here. Both of you have been amazing guests. I hope I get you back on future shows, and I'll definitely be talking to both of you about other things that we can do, even getting some artists on your podcast and everything like that. So I appreciate both of you for being on and sharing this rich conversation.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
No problem at all.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.